Hi everyone, in today's video I'm going to teach you a way to create watercolor splatter marks without getting your hands too dirty. Creating splatter marks is a great way to give your sketches more texture and to make your sketches look more lively. So let's take a look at some of the examples that I have here that have splatter marks. All the sketches you see here were actually created for past tutorials on my YouTube channel. So for this particular sketch, I have splatter marks on the road here. Sometimes I may just use my pen to place dots on the ground. However, if I want to have more dots, more splatter or different sizes, for the dots, I would use my watercolor brush to create splatters like this. And this can create textures very easily. This sketch looks more lively with these splatter marks than without. Later on, I will show you some examples without splatter marks. Here's another example. The splatter marks here look more like a fine spray. The splatter marks here are more subtle. You can see all these very small dots. And here we have some splatter marks on the building and also in the sky. The splatter marks on the buildings are intentional, while the ones in the sky, those are actually accidents. But in this case, it looks like a happy accident because it looks good. So with splatter marks on the buildings, you can give the buildings more character. And here on the right side, you can also see some splatter marks and some splatter marks on the ground as well. With this sketch, I have the splatter marks on the roofs. These roofs are actually made with tiles, so there is a lot of details, and I did not draw all the tiles. I just used these squiggly ink lines to represent the tiles. And I also have ink dots here to create textures. And in addition to the ink dots, I also have watercolor splatters here on the side wall and also here on the roof. So you can see this texture. It really makes this sketch look more lively. This sketch without the splatter marks will probably look too clean. This is a rather clean and controlled sketch with no splatter marks on the street, and the streets are actually quite clean. But the thing is, having splatter marks on the street doesn't mean the streets are dirty. So this is how it looks without splatter marks, and I think it looks a bit too clean. Here's another example, and this one definitely can use some splatter marks on the ground as well as on the building. This is the sketch that I will add splatter marks to later on. So we'll do a before and after comparison, and you can decide whether it looks better with or without the splatter marks. Alright, let me show you how to create watercolor splatter marks. The tools you need are clips, any watercolor brush, and obviously watercolor. What I'm going to do is actually run the paint on the watercolor brush off the handles of the clip onto the paper. These are just generic clips that I use to hold down the pages of my sketchbook. I always have them with me. I don't like to bring too many materials out when I'm sketching on location. The colors that I like to use for my splatter marks are yellow, orange, red, and black or brown. If you want your splatters to look good with the colors already on your paper, you can use colors that are closer together on the color wheel. So for example, with orange, you can use either yellow or red, or you can use orange as well, just a different shade, maybe something darker. Concentrated colors are going to look better compared to diluted color. If you want a fine spray or if you want more control over your splatter, don't load the brush with too much water. So all you have to do is to run the brush against the clip, and you can see the fine spray. It may not be obvious, but there is some sort of direction with the spray, and you can change the direction just by changing how you hold the clip. So when I have the clip like this, the spray, the splatter looks more, the direction is more vertical. That drop happens because there is too much water on the brush and I pressed down too hard, so the water dropped onto the paper. This can be distracting, so you may want to remove it. Oops. Do not dab your tissue on the paper surface and drag it, otherwise it's going to create a smudge like that. And now let's try a bigger brush and see what happens. So it seems like I can get larger splatters. I also have some paint dripping onto the paper. In this case, it actually doesn't look too bad because we have a variety of sizes. Whereas earlier on, it's a fine spray, but then suddenly there's this big dot there. So this actually looks better. If there is too much paint, you can actually use your watercolor brush to pick up the excess paint, provided your brush is dry enough. The reason why concentrated paint works better is because watercolor will dry lighter. So if you use diluted paint, the color will dry and it's going to look pale. So you can actually use the paint straight from the pen. I like to use these clips because, as you can see, the clip doesn't really block the paper, so you can see what you are spraying onto. This color is not that obvious. Let's see what's this color. It looks like a magenta. And this is very easy to clean up. I don't suppose this will rust, but this black part here will actually rust. So just be mindful. And now let's put some splatter marks on this sketch. If you don't want the splatter to hit the people, you can find some way to cover them. And also when you are spraying, make sure you are spraying in this direction so that the splatter marks are in this direction rather than in this direction, in which case it's definitely going to hit the people on the chair. So let's do it. You can also control your splatter by having a brush on the clip here and spray onto the page. This will give you slightly more control. And now let's try some orange. A bigger brush will work better for larger splatters. Just beware that when you have more paint on the paper, this is going to take much longer to dry because these droplets, they are actually quite big. So you can see that is actually a lot of paint. And I accidentally have some splatter marks on the face of this person. You can also tap your brush on another brush if you have another brush. Tapping your brush this way is a bit more difficult to control compared to running the brush across the clip. This looks alright. This looks nice. You also don't want excessive splatter on your sketch because otherwise the splatter will look too distracting. And when you're not sure whether or not you should add more splatter, that's the stage where you can probably stop. This is the before and after. Let me know which you prefer in the comment section below. And if you guys want to check out more drawing tutorials, you can visit the link that I have for you in the video description below, which links to my YouTube playlist of tutorials that I have made over the last few years. Thanks for watching. I hope this tutorial is helpful. See you again. Bye.